So, lots of people ask me recently how I ended up with marine biology and if it's actually a field worth pursuing or if it's a career with a dead end. And this video, I'm finally getting to answering all those questions and how I grew to be a marine biologist and what it actually took to be in the field, how we showed up at conferences and what the university part of it was really like. So, have a look. Okay, so let's talk about universities. Obviously, there's universities that are aiming straight for marine biology and that are really well equipped in terms of marine biology. Like in Kiel, northern Germany, the university actually has submarines and ROVs and all this sort of gears just standing around. Personally, I started in Graz in Austria, which really does not have anything to do with marine biology. However, in the bachelor's, you will often find yourself just studying straightforward biology. In my case, it was actually ethology, so behavior sciences. But that does not mean that in your master's you can't relocate to marine fields or any other field for that matter, which in many cases is actually a good thing because it means you get a general idea before you have to pin down one particular field that you want to focus on. And ultimately, it's going to be your thesis that defines which field you are a professional in. So really, just start off easy, go for biology, and then find your path in the career and focus on whatever will really interest you. And it might just end up being a field that's very different from what you originally had in mind. Now, when it comes to universities, obviously you might want to choose a location that's somewhere near you. So if you are from the US, just go find a university that's in your area. For example, it would be Monterey is very big. San Diego has a nice institute. I'm sure there's something in Miami or somewhere down in the Keys. I know that in the Caribbean there's a couple of institutes. Most of them are very much lionfish or invasive species focused right now, which actually is a really exciting topic. There's lots of reef research going on down there as well, just like in Australia, Sydney University, or many other places around the world. But again, find your institute in your area, at least to start with, and later when you have decided on one particular topic, you might just want to relocate into the area where that topic is really written in very big letters and be a professional in your career, in your field, with the right university in the background, which ultimately might also be the place where you might end up working. So, university, not an easy choice later on in the field, but to start with, just go with whatever you have available. Not that big a deal. Okay, office work. You will find yourself behind a computer, even though you might not want it or you might not like it, but sitting on a computer is a big part of any research field. So while the data collection in the field is always a lot of fun, personally love it, but it also means that at some point you have to take all the observation, all the data, all the numbers you collected, put them down into an Excel sheet or into a spreadsheet of some sort, run the statistics. You will spend time on the computer and you will end up writing down all your findings into nice little research papers, and you will spend a lot of time writing and rewriting them and trying to publish them. Unfortunately, all part of a package deal. But that being said, also this part can be pretty rewarding. So while for me, I love the data collection, I said that, and I do not like the statistics at all. In fact, I personally pretty much hate them, but part of a deal. And once you have run your statistics, you have nice results, and then it comes back to a part that I actually really enjoy, which is the discussion. So basically, once you finished your research on, in my case the last one was invasive species, so you have your numbers and you know that in a certain area, in a certain time frame, a certain amount of those invasive species showed up. So then in the discussion you get to the point where you can start arguing basically with yourself, or if you're lucky with a couple of other people who worked with you, and come up with points why or why not it is a good or bad thing that those animals showed up and what they are affecting on the long run. So that again, very interesting for me, because also it leads to further research down the road. So it can be you yourself going back into the field and doing more on it, or research papers tend to be read by a handful of scientists around the world on certain occasions, and they might just use your research that you did before and follow up on it somewhere down the road in the future. So definitely good one. So, studies at university. For me, it's been a long time ago by now. I do have a bunch of friends who studied marine biology and who are actually working for universities right now. Some of them have permanent contracts. Some of them actually struggle to get the funding for one research project after the other, which is unfortunately also a big deal and a big part of the life of any researcher, really. You have to write grant proposals where you basically try to convince a committee that the work that you're doing is particularly interesting and incredibly important, and then they might or might not end up giving you a bunch of money so you can conduct your research. Generally speaking, those research projects are usually ridiculously expensive, especially in the marine field. The deeper you want to go, the more expensive it gets, because often in different cases it involves big research ships, it might involve submarines, it might involve ROVs, but in many cases it's actually quite possible to do it on a much smaller scale, which is also a big part of what we try to do with Project Manaia. We are basically scaling down the research projects as such. We still have an ROV on the boat, but it's a lot smaller than the big ones that you would find on a big research vessel. We do have a drone on the boat, which helps for mapping out seagrass or coral reefs or many other things. So we do have everything on board that you need for basic research. If you want to go looking for dolphins, cetaceans, or whales, or monk seals, or whatever it might be, you can always do that from a small boat as well. In fact, there's many universities that have established cooperations with ferry lines, with charter boats, and they just use those as a platform to conduct their sightings, which works pretty well. But back to the university itself. So, as I said, I studied in Graz in Austria to start with, and obviously the first step was biology. So that involved botany, genetics, chemistry, physics, math. We had all of those. We call them assisting sciences. So you have to deal with all of those at some point down the road of your career. Just no sneaky way around it, sorry. But ultimately you might just find yourself in a situation where you actually need the knowledge of any of those related fields, and you might just be very, very happy about remembering some of the stuff that you learned in school or university. So it is not a waste of time. It is part of a deal. It might not be the part of the deal that you particularly enjoy, but it will come in handy at some stage, I promise. So once you are further down, meaning a master's study or possibly PhD, you can obviously choose the fields that you really want to work on. So you generally get a bigger selection of different courses that you can choose, and out of this big package you have to choose a handful that you really do. Could be seminars, could be excursions, could be longer field trips, can be a combination of those, and you have to conduct them, you have to get a decent grade, and then you're done. So generally speaking, in Austria that is for right now, the bachelor's will take you 6 semesters, meaning 3 years. The master's in theory is 4 semesters, meaning 2 years. So in theory, in 5 years, you can finish your studies as a master. For the PhD, I would add an extra 3 years or so. And quite honestly, I met very, very few people who actually finished university in the minimum time. I know from myself, for the bachelor's, I took ages. I took closer to 6 years and 6 semesters, but that had to do a lot with the fact that I was actually spending my summers in Croatia by the sea already. I was working for a little institute there, and so every year I spent half a year down there, ultimately not doing courses at the university, so I lost that time and didn't get my credit points. I did, however, learn a lot for my later work in that time. So it all comes with the trade-off. Plus, I was mostly working on the side as bicycle courier, as promotion person. I had all sorts of crappy jobs during my time at university. But that's what it took for me to finance it all, and it might be a very similar story for some of you. So keep that in mind when you ask people about the minimum time it takes to get to a certain point. Always a consideration. Gaining experience. Just like in any other job around the world, everywhere where you apply for a job, people will ask you about having experience in the field. Yeah, strange one, that one, isn't it? The thing is, everybody requires you to have experience, so you have to get it from somewhere. Ultimately, especially when it comes to marine biology or biology in general, there's lots of internships, lots of volunteer positions where you actually end up paying a lot of money. So I'm not saying it's a good thing, it's actually most certainly not. And one of the big points I made with Project Manaia was also that I did not want people to pay for internships. It's just something that I was never able to afford, so I didn't want to put that extra stepping stone in the way of people. So right now we're down at the point where we can offer internship spots on our research boat to people for the cost of living on the boat, which basically is the same amount that I pay on it as well, same as my wife and everybody else on the boat. So equal shares amongst everyone. So, but in terms of the internships, there is a huge selection out there. So depending on what it is you want to do, most people will ask about dolphins now, I know it. And there is different NGOs out there working on dolphins. I know, for example, in Croatia it's Blue Sea, it's DMAT in Montenegro and in Turkey. There's others in Greece like Archipelagos, there's a couple in Spain. Save the Med Foundation, for example, is down there. And there's more and more of them around the world. So these guys, you generally have to pay to join them, but that means you will also get out on the water every now and then, you will do land surveys, you will get hands-on experience. You can, by the way, do the same thing on board our boat. We do keep our eyes open for cetaceans, meaning dolphins and whales on the way, or any other marine megafauna. We try to spot the turtles and other things as well as we come past them. Doesn't always happen, but when we see them, we write them down. And also doing an internship with institutes like that is not a guarantee that you see the animals you want to see. Ultimately, they are all wildlife, so you can't really schedule them to show up at a certain time and a certain place. There's of course other options out there. So there is by now a couple of dive centers that have a marine biology branch to them. So they offer particular courses, they offer little seminars, they offer university workshops, and also that can be a place where you can get valuable experience. However, you should do your homework and research beforehand and get in touch with people who have been there before, because those places tend to, well, use the workforce that they get out of marine biologists and ultimately makes them work a lot for not exactly what they actually came for. So you might be there because you want to be a marine biologist and because you want to get the field experience, but you might end up just being a dive guide. So make sure to do your homework, make sure to talk to the right people before, and maybe ask for suggestions from people who have done something similar before. And those are generally the people you will meet at university, or you will meet them in the right forums or Facebook or the relevant groups anyways. So that would be one. There is also a couple of institutes, or not institutes, they are more like marine field stations that have like summer class courses for school groups. Some of them also invite universities to show up, some do like extra education for teachers. And also those people do look for students to help out. For example, there's Meeresschule in Pula, there's Schule am Meer in Kruk in Croatia. There's a couple of those. Right now, obviously, they are not running, just like nothing else is running. But generally speaking, they do look for interns, and those are positions where at least you don't have to pay. Sometimes you might have to pay for your accommodation, but generally things are covered. Plus, if you do it for a while, or in your second year, you might actually end up earning a little bit of money out of this. So that makes it a very feasible summertime job. Earns you a bit of money, even though it might not be a lot, but it gets you the experience at the same time. And with that experience, later on, you can apply for other jobs and say, hey, I already have the experience, I did this. Always a plus. Okay, so let's get down to the chase. Jobs in marine biology. Yes, there is jobs that you can do as a marine biologist, obviously, otherwise nobody would study it, right? I do have to say though, money or the job should not be your main drive. Marine biology really is a bunch of motivated people. People are passionate about what it is they're doing. They want to protect the environment, they want to take care of the coral reefs, of the fish, of the sharks, of the dolphins, or whatever your topic might be. But out of all the marine biologists I met in my life, I would say 99.9% of them were purely driven by passion. And well, I believe it's a really good thing to know that. So ultimately though, there is of course different jobs. So we talked about the institutes before that do the courses for school groups. Yes, it is a job. No, it will not be enough to survive. Well, maybe by yourself you should be fine, but once you talk about a family or a better half, it's gonna get tight. So maybe not the kind of job you want to look into. Obviously in academia there is jobs, so you can work with the university. However, I have to say competition is probably pretty high. I applied for a couple of jobs in that field and never quite made the cut. Part of the reason might be because I had very few actual jobs at the universities. So already during your studies you can apply for like the assistant positions during seminars. I did that once or twice, 2 times I think. Yeah, and if you don't have a lot of experience with that, chances are you might not get a position later on. So again, it's all about the experience. What I found for myself, well, I found myself working on Greenpeace ship actually for a couple of years, and while there was a paid job at some stage, obviously not at the beginning, everybody's volunteer to start with, but later down the road it was a paid job. However, I was actually maintenance crew, so I worked on deck, shipping, painting, doing all of that. But the beauty about this one was that I managed to establish a network of marine biologists, of scientists, of researchers, of different NGOs around the world. So I built an incredible network in those years on this ship. And from this network, you can actually get back the sources for jobs, for information, for grants, for all sorts of valuable information that you might or might not be able to use at some stage. So there's obviously also completely different jobs. So look at SeaWorld. You might want to be a dolphin trainer. Personally, I do not at all agree with the fact that dolphins or whales are locked up in a tiny little pool. If that's your thing, fine, sell your soul, go for it. I have no idea how well those guys are paid, but well, definitely are paying with the soul, I'm sure of that. You can work for aquariums, and while you might or might not agree with the idea of an aquarium altogether, I do have a bunch of friends who are working in well-run aquariums. I have to say they're incredibly well run. They have breeding programs for seahorses and other kinds of marine animals, and ultimately we have to look at the fact that animals that go extinct in the wild might still be around in aquariums. So if there's a running breeding program, that might just be the stepping stone to get formerly extinct animals back out into the wild. So for that, I think aquariums do have absolutely an incredible value for us. Also, ultimately, they do educational work. I mean, people can't really relate to fish, which is one of the major issues why we need marine biologists, because we have to bring the word out there that we do need fish, we do need algae, we do need all these things that we don't see because they're under the water. So people who go to an aquarium might for the first time in their life see all those things and be able to better relate to them. So absolutely valuable in that respect. And yes, aquariums do hire marine biologists for a decent salary, so that might be something you might want to look into. Another thing is all the people who want to build like wind farms offshore somewhere. or marinas or harbors, all of those have to be signed off by an ecologist, by a marine biologist, ideally a marine ecologist. So somebody has to go there and do an environmental assessment, meaning you look at the situation, you see what's there, you are the one who decides whether or not it's worth protecting what's already there, or whether or not they are allowed or not allowed to build a wind farm, to extend the marina, to build a harbor, to make a bigger breakwater, whatever it might be that they want to construct. But somebody has to sign it off. Those jobs are, generally speaking, pretty well paid. It does come with the downside though, because you might be pressured from the industry or from the manufacturers of those harbors, marinas, whatever it might be in the end. But yeah, those people have been known to be under a lot of pressure from different sides. So definitely not an easy one. And of course, there's always NGOs. NGOs are around the world and they work on all sorts of different topics. And you can basically pick your poison. Choose marine mammals, choose marine debris, choose seagrass, you name it, there's an NGO out there working on it. While NGOs are generally always looking for people, and they are generally looking for very well qualified people, because they need people who are able to communicate with the general public and convince them that their idea is a really good one to work on. So they do look for good people, they do look for motivated people, and you might just be a perfect fit for that. Please be aware though, NGOs are not known for paying huge salaries. So again, it's the drive and not the money. So either you believe in a cause or you don't. If you don't go down that road, because you have to be convinced yourself, otherwise you will never be able to convince others. Yeah, so if you want to volunteer with an NGO, please do drop us a line, write us a comment down below, or just get in touch with me. Also, if you are thinking about establishing your own NGO because there's a very, very specific topic that you couldn't find an NGO about yet, feel free to get in touch and I'll happily talk you through the process that we went through, and maybe there's a good way to work together in the future. So, can't lose, right? And finally, there was the question for me personally, why I became a marine biologist. And quite honestly, I can actually pin it down to a day in my life. When I was 5 years old, my parents took me on vacation to Sri Lanka and I went snorkeling. I always knew how to snorkel. In fact, I learned snorkeling before I learned swimming. Anyway, so I jumped into the water and I went snorkeling on a coral reef for the first time. And I remember seeing incredibly colorful fish, obviously seeing coral, and I was blown away. And I just fell in love with everything that I saw. And it was pretty much then and there that I decided I want to be a marine biologist. Obviously, coming from a landlocked country, lots of people had a lot of fun about that, and hardly anybody took me really too serious until I actually signed up at university, studied biology, and then it was still, he's gonna be a biologist, it's gonna be fine. And then basically the day I finished university, I went to Amsterdam and joined a Greenpeace ship and started sailing around the world. And by now, if you have been following these videos before, you know that I'm running a small marine research NGO, and we are cruising around the Mediterranean. We did lots of work in Myanmar, we established coral gardens, coral nurseries, we did the groundwork to establish no-take zones and entire marine protected areas. So if you are behind an idea with enough passion and enough willpower and a long breath, you can get a long way. And well, if there's one thing you take away from this, then let it be the fact that if you're passionate about something, don't let anybody ever stop you. If you believe in it, you can make it happen. It might take you a long time and it might take you a lot of struggle, and boy, we did struggle. I mean, just look at the videos of the first season in Myanmar, fixing up that boat, or the second or the third. Any of those, there will be struggle, there will be really crappy times, but I swear to God, the few good days in between, they more than make up for it on the long run. And ultimately, by now, I wouldn't want to miss any of the days. Not the crappy ones, definitely not the good ones. And ultimately, I'm perfectly happy with the decision I took to become a marine biologist. It is tough at times to see things die around you, and yes, it is frustrating to see that so many people just don't care and don't seem to be learning. But ultimately, if we, the people who pretend to understand exactly what's going on, why the marine environment is so important, if we don't care about it, then who else will? So I think the important job for a marine biologist or any biologist, any researcher at this point is to ultimately phrase the things that he or she is working on in simple terms so that everybody else can relate to it and can fully understand why the hell this guy or that girl is burning so much for that particular topic, and they all jump on board with us and help us to protect the world or protect the oceans. And ultimately, we are the big enemy, so keep that in mind. And if you have any more questions, feel free to write them in the comments below, drop me a line, get in touch, and I'll happily answer them in yet another video coming up. Until then, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe. See you next time.